Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the webinar Deception, Advantage Reality for Detection and Response. I'm very pleased to welcome Dan Cummins, who is a senior analyst and part of the security team for 451 Research. I am Carolyn Crandall, the Chief Marketing Officer for Attivo Networks. So a few housekeeping rules that we want to go through, or housekeeping items that we'd like to go through first. Feel free to ask questions along the way. There is a question button and also a chat window that you're welcome to use. All slides will be shared after the webinar. We will also be recording the webinar for playbacks and to give you the opportunity to share it with other individuals within your organization. And please don't forget to leave feedback at the end of the webinar. After Dan runs through a short presentation, what we'll do is open it up for a little bit of discussion and also welcome Q&A during this period of time. And so again, many thanks for joining us today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dan. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. Let's begin. 451 recently profiled Attivo Networks and the potential for deception-based technologies to see high demand going forward. Today, on this webinar, we'll discuss deception and engagement technologies in the context of automated capabilities available from some distinctive and advanced security operations platforms. Our discussion will highlight actionable, unique qualities and the value of advanced deception, the value derived from process-centric capabilities that advanced deception enables in terms of detection, verification, real-time intelligence, and the opportunity to coordinate a superior, appropriately automated or human activity, and the emerging demand for advanced deception and engagement. It's the availability and delivery of these technologies through platforms and the relation to other emerging trends, including security orchestration. Security product and service innovators are turning to simulation technologies in the same manner that manufacturers embraced digital simulation over the past 20 years to vastly improve their products in terms of quality and safety. In security product and service markets, we're seeing simulation technologies now impacting testing, staff training, controls validation, and defensive and offensive security capability and strategy. 451 Research views security simulation technologies, including deception, as among key emerging white space opportunities to address substantial critical capability gaps in data centers, on the network, on endpoints, in the cloud, on the Internet of Things. I'm sorry, I'm trying to advance my screen here. Oh boy. Sorry, there we go. When we look at advanced, evolved engagement platforms that use deception as a technique, we see relevant innovation addressing not only enterprise risk challenges, but operational opportunities as well. So as an example, let's discuss these in the context of security operations platforms generally, and we're showing you what we would probably put up as key attributes for any platform. We think in the case of deception and engagement, specifically, just a ton of relevance, direct relevance. The range of step-up functional improvements made possible by combining deception and engagement with incident response workflow is very notable. It includes, number one, accurate detection. Deception realism, as we discussed in our report, attracts attackers. It enables a very high signal-to-noise ratio, and that realism is achieved in part through very rich virtualized simulation technologies which provide the essential breakthrough capability to attract and engage attackers, enabling real-time observation and intelligence and high efficacy. Good outcomes, of course, depend always upon good data. Number two, workflow automation and orchestration. These engagement platforms reflect the bidirectional product integrations that 451 views as likely to facilitate better performance from existing environments and for building process maturity. We like the user experience implications of internal linkage between detection and incident response systems generally. In Attivo's case, orchestration between detection and incident response leverages the platform's leg up in terms of differentiated signaling and verification, a very fungible malware analysis engine. There's automated workflow and obviously judicious application for a human intervention. There's a whole new actionable data set and very forward-looking capabilities in terms of platform. Three, Enterprise risk prioritization. This is a big one for us this year at 451. Live attacks on an engagement platform are tracked in near real time, if not real time, and they reveal a wide range of risk intelligence. They're extremely efficient for known and unknown attackers and identifying multi-vector threats. 4, efficiency and quality. In our research over the past year, we've repeatedly discussed organizations' security process maturity, particularly as it relates to impediments to incident response product adoption. Alert fatigue and false positives are huge quality problems, but they also drive recruiting and retention problems on a human resource level. Deception and engagement and automation mark distinct improvement opportunities in terms of data and process quality in the Security Operations Center. And finally, scalability. One of the most demanding evolutions in IT that we watch across the entire firm at 451 is that of continuous development and operational capability at scale. Enterprise, global, cloud. The pressures are that IT has to be always on, always changing, always secure. However, getting from periodic to continuous security, that's a journey that very few companies have even begun to undertake in a serious manner. We have no doubt, however, as to the absolute necessity of employing complex simulations, including deception and engagement, to building those long-term, forward-looking capabilities with respect to continuous security protection. Operational pain points. Let's talk about those. We do a ton of survey work at 451. Operational pain points associated with security issues are widely covered, not only in our security group, but across the firm. On this very recent work, we've rank ordered those problems. As you can see, malware continues to be the top challenge. So we think that's good evidence here of very positive implications for deception adoption, followed by data loss, user behavior at number 3, and I think it's pretty obvious there's a low probability that even a modest group of product technologies can address the very broad requirements. I think there's almost 24 pain points listed here, but important to note that malware at the top, that is almost, well, it's 2.5 times as important as the high majority of all those categories listed here. When we look at project initiatives and prioritization of spending, the major recent product development trends in security include behavior-based analytic detection, interoperability, and the need for security technology to evolve with IT into virtualized realms to the cloud. And the survey data shown here, we see that improved detection and security operations in general terms are the top project priorities. Quickly want to mention shelfware. This is a study we did in 2014. We'll probably do it again this year. Our current hypothesis regarding shelfware issues are very consistent with what you see here. We've done a lot of work talking about the SIM over the past year. The SIM needs a SIM. We think there's significant replacement, upgrade, and augmentation options showing significant rapid ROI for security management. We're talking quite a bit about the changing buyer mood recently at 451, particularly within the security group. And we think that, for example, deception and engagement could score very well on a test of purchasers' own accountability to themselves and their organizations, asking questions such as, can we quickly deploy this new technology ourselves? Can we utilize a high majority of the new product's capability, or just a modest fraction thereof? The usual, less than optimal deployment. Could we ask the question, how will this meaningfully improve what we can do operationally? And of course, what are the metrics that we're going to use to measure our success with the new technology? This is a framework that we use within our group. We call it the ASAP, or Actionable Situational Awareness Platform. And what I've done here, we recently wrote on this, and we can provide a link to that report for subscribers, but I've underlined and bold-cased some of the direct relevance that we see to to deception and engagement platforms, as well as incident response platforms. So a couple of examples here in terms of gathering very high-quality data for assessment and investigation. That's certainly true in the case of a deception platform that's generating, frankly, a whole new class of high-quality data in terms of actual real-time intelligence and the ability to follow an attack and its implications and its impacts across the environment. And finally, just in terms of action, that's what I just described as very contextual intelligence, so that you can optimize response and work efficiently, either in terms of machine automation or, as we said, judicious human intervention. When we think about how deception and engagement platforms are positioned across the landscape, frankly, the landscape's changing a great deal. This represents a new product and service category, but there are certain recognizable elements along a continuum of tactical capability that's evolving and leads to what we call, as we said, our ASAP convention. Detection and incident response linkage, it's most often seen now as a product footprint initiative by endpoint detection and platform vendors. Frankly, that's something that some of the independent pure plays lack, but a lot of the detection vendors are working hard to provide that sort of natural extension into workflow, the incident response, remediation. Some of the network-based detection vendors have extended those footprints as well. FireEye, for example, buying Invotos is a good example of that. So we think this is becoming a very natural trend for detection players. The operating conditions for managing enterprise security, the facts on the ground, it's all about near constant surveillance and breach attempts by attackers. It just doesn't shut off at night. It just goes on. And it implies the need for a battlefield sensibility and capability, intelligence, stealth, and deception. Deception is a natural strategic tactic in warfare. So we'd say that the perceptions of deception and engagement platforms could very quickly evolve to something natural and essential for the enterprise security environment. We think mainstream adoption is attainable, particularly in the sense of a meaningful and easy augmentation to network-based detection. Before we take questions, I'd like to wrap by telling you that when 451 was looking at security-focused simulation and deception technologies in 2016 and zeroing in on what to cover and write about, we took note saw that Attivo had recently expanded its operational functionality and use cases to address incident response and automated workflow through a platform approach. We all know that security technology buyers now, as a matter of course, seek highly interoperable products. They demand behavior-based rather than signature-based detection, or both, but certainly behavioral is becoming table stakes. Buyers want to end up closer to real-time analysis after implementing a new product than they were before. They want those products to reflect vendor expertise out of the box, but also easily facilitate their own way of doing things. They want forward-looking orchestration spanning as many activities as possible. They want to consume these capabilities or have these capabilities through a platform. And obviously, that positions those themselves, going forward to be agile and basically keep up with the larger IT environment. That's really the most challenging thing of all, is to serve the business, which is obviously moving now at web speed. So that's a good opportunity to break for questions. Carolyn, you have got the cue there. I have a question teed up for you, but is there anything you want to say first?
Well, first, thank you for preparing the presentation for this webinar. We have many organizations that are looking at 2017 for how they get better detection, and as you mentioned, the integration of incident handling into their operations so that they can improve their incident response to these attacks. So I think there's a lot of good perspectives that 451 and that you've shared on behalf of 451. Inside of this webinar. So thank you very much for that. We do have some questions that I think we'll fold in, but I'm curious, you're your question that you had for me, feel free to ask, and then what I'll do is probably fire some of the questions back at you after that.
Sure. So, yeah, I didn't mention, I mean, my background as an analyst covering a wider world of enterprise software, as I said, it touched heavily upon, simulation more than 10 years ago. So I was eager to find out what was going on in security when I joined 451 last year. So the answer is that there's a lot going on, and I just mentioned all the different things that the purchasing buyer really has on his mind right now. Not that the vendors are back on their heels, but the customer side has gotten a lot of opportunity to get smart over the last 5 or 10 years. On average, they've got 3 or 4 dozen point product technologies just to become acquainted with and try and get implemented. So in your case, you're doing so much right now. What is winning attention right now with respect to your value proposition? What do you talk about first and then second?
Yeah. So great question. And a couple of years ago, when we first started to put out the deception platform, we really started talking to customers about being able to have visibility inside of the network to, in real time, detect the threats that have evaded or bypassed other prevention systems. And it's interesting as we continue to develop the overall threat matrix platform that additional functionality has came into play. So although we may start the question with, start the conversation with visibility around what's inside the network to know quickly and efficiently, but also it's expanded on to kind of that predictive piece. So how strong do they feel about their ability to know where the attacker entrances are and what that lateral movement might look like? So building out the solutions so that we could give them visibility to exposed credentials and misconfigurations and leftover credentials that all create opportunity for an attacker. And so on that detection piece, there's definitely a conversation around eyes and ears to things inside the network. As we continue the conversation, and probably the second value case for our customers has been around the investigation side of things. And it's not that there aren't a variety of tools to help them with analyzing an investigation, but it's a lot around the efficiency. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of integration that we're hearing that people want, and we are seeing a shift with vendor-delivered products that are starting to integrate the information together so that you get better correlation, and it takes a lot of the manual work out of trying to analyze and respond to that attack. So the fact that Attivo has its own basic sandboxing technology to be able to analyze the attack and a very comprehensive dashboard that lets them take incident response actions in one click or even through automation has been very appealing for the time savings. Another use case is then not only the malware, but also just around phishing analysis to feed data into the solution to be able to understand malicious links and URLs. And again, just hours of efficiency that can be put into automation versus manual work. And then the last piece of it, so you've got the detection, you've got the investigation, and now you start to look at the incident response automation. And that really ties to the latest expansion of the platform, which is ThreatOps. And what this is really focused on is creating the playbooks to create more efficiency in the incident response handling. And what that will do is not only take the information that we have, but score it, add other information to it so that you get a more comprehensive view, and then leverage those integrations that we have to not only do the quarantine blocking, but then also the threat hunting behind it. And so when you look at the comprehensiveness of this platform, it really speaks to the integrations and the value that the overall Attivo platform can provide to our customers. And so when we look at who's bought our technology and who's interested in purchasing in 2017, it's really around those 3 areas.
Is there a question from the field that we can take?
Yes, there was a question from, from the field, and let me go back to it here. Just one second. So this was around some of the trends, trends that you're seeing in detection. You talk a lot about behavioral and contextual automation, and the question is strengths and weaknesses between more of, and I'm paraphrasing because it was a bit of a long question that came in, but between that and what you see the value in deception technology.
Well, we're of the view that layered really never went away as a best practice, and I did correct myself at some point saying, behavioral doesn't really replace signature, or signatureless doesn't replace having the right signatures, but the systems obviously have to keep pace too. That the scalability was frankly just one of the issues with signatures, so that problem's being solved. But in terms of just take behavioral analytics as an example, you need all elements. You need entity and user behavior and network behavioral analytics. It's a kind of a full spectrum of capability around behavioral analysis. You need some machine learning. Frankly, machines are very good at making very fast binary good or bad decisions, and there's a number of different models that you can choose to deploy, if not both, if you've got the means to do that. So I think that in particular, having the right stack of technologies in series or simultaneously in some cases to obviously deal with, let's call it this sort of 80% cloud noise, whether it's a 20-80 situation or not, it's hard to say, but my guess is it probably is, that those types of technologies can be, you can cope with that with some conventional technologies or maybe some reasonably advanced augmentations. But it's important to note that, and Carolyn, you have a great marketing hub, and I know you've got other, your own survey work to talk about, but the idea that prevention and detection are two different disciplines in security, I think that's an important one to talk about because we're in a perimeterless world. We know about the new threats from the IoT world. So you need some advanced detection, whether or not you think or you've got some evidence that your prevention is so good. Those are two essential disciplines, and as I said, layered never really went away. So what we're real struck by is the fact that a deception platform can see an attack in real time. There's not a lot of resource needed for verification. If it got there, it had to get there somehow. It was driven there, pushed there by an attacker. So that's a very important data point, and there's a whole bunch of other data that kind of comes off of that, including what were the specific defenses that were bypassed that resulted in the situation we have now. But now we've got to get some real-time intel on what's going on here. What are the lateral tries, and what does the CNC look like? What's, obviously, having that's almost like a momentary dossier on what the attacker's doing, that informs your defenses, and it helps position you going forward. That's why we're calling this out as something that's likely to be essential. And with a good shot at mainstream adoption going forward. So that's the short answer I come back to, is that layered never really went away. You really still do need all of these things.
Great. Thanks, Dan. And it's interesting, the survey that Dan mentioned, and we'll be more than happy to share that with folks as well. It's also posted on our website. We did a survey of close to 200 people at the end of Q4 2016, and the survey was specifically around the shifts in budget between prevention and detection, and what some of the major catalysts were in driving that shift. And what we found was, although many predictions said it may be 70-30, 60-40, that the survey respondents came back and said that they are currently shifting their budgets to 50-50 between prevention and detection. And so it definitely seems that it's not the conversation a year ago where people were trying to, or the idea of assumed breach seemed novel, that now it seems more accepted and seems to be driving the purchase behavior of many organizations. And so, again, other information, which is probably no surprise about some of the reasons why detection is needed, but then it goes into some of the challenges as well as to what are the things that people see are the most challenging to address. And at the very end of that report, it goes in to talk a little bit about how deception can be used to deal with those challenges, predominantly around the incident handling piece of it. So, so great. I appreciate you mentioning that piece as well. I think one of the things that would be great, Dan, is to get your additional insight around the operational efficiency of things, and how fast are you seeing this this trend towards integrating the different platforms? Like, are you seeing more research information or inquiry requests around increasing that visibility and increasing that integration, or do you think it's more conversational at a point? And thinking some people in the audience may be wanting to benchmark where they are against where you're seeing the market right now.
So, yeah, the tone of conversations and questions that we're getting are, they want to walk before they run. So a lot of, frankly, it's surprising the size of some of the organizations that have not made meaningful progress on with automation. And we know that some of that's due to the skills shortage and the process maturity. A lot of large companies don't even kind of operate with a dedicated, discrete SOC. They do it as an augmentation. They talk about security hires rather than security organizations within IT. So it's a big range of maturity level and capability, but I think we've said a number of times, we're really struck by how slowly some of the, let's say, the independent pure plays in automation orchestration are building market profile with customers. On the other hand, I think a lot of the vendors, the independents in particular, once they get a good traction with, let's say, a good range of customers, they want to further groom and develop the product and address what I would call kind of a higher level strategic use case, which typically means orchestration rather than just doing incident response automation. There is obviously a relevance to adjacent technologies, activities, and of course, above all, you're trying to help serve the client's need to build a process that's very effective. So, we only really got talking in a sort of urgent way a little more than a year ago about low interoperability, about some vendors' unwillingness to make their products really highly interoperable and be really agreeable to that idea that the typical company with 50 products, 50-point products in the door, paying maintenance or subscription, there's no reasonable hope of even getting that down by half over 2 to 3 years. So the products that they have got to become more interoperable before you can get underway big time with building advanced process maturity. So it is gradual, but everybody pretty much recognizes what has to be done. So there's still some kind of watching and waiting in terms of, I'll say, probably what the large SIM platforms represent is still, just static log repository, but there's so much actionable data that's laying around, hosted in a number of sensor systems and threat intelligence systems. So there's still kind of this heartbeat and sort of centralized heartbeat that's waiting to happen So I think we've taken note most recently of the detection vendors. We've been talking a lot in 2016 about the independents and some of the splashier, startups in orchestration, but the real meat and potatoes, the dirty work's going on in the detection systems, and there is a very, as we said, kind of a natural extension and opportunity for the detection players to do good work and put good systems in front of their customers. Because after all, if you're watching alerts and you're hands-on with the detection platforms, you don't want to have to pivot out to another system. It's just obviously we're talking about what is the right and most natural way to automate workflow with some, as we said, very slick, seamless opportunity for human analysts to get involved, to communicate, and to get a result.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And if I pivot a little bit on you here, one of the things that people are looking at is obviously deception has evolved a lot from kind of low interaction honeypots to deception today that involves network and endpoint decoys and lures. Do you have some preferred use cases or anything in particular that you think is a sweet spot for deception technology?
Well, I think as we said in the report, if you've got intellectual property to protect, you're probably more inclined to want to do, let's say, attribution as part of your security strategy, meaning you want to not only have great defense, but you need to play a little bit of offense and find out what your attackers' motivations are. I think we mentioned that that's where you're probably first likely to see, oh my God, yes, absolutely, we need that. We're in a new world, and we're completely distributed, and our intellectual property, our assets are actually everywhere. So I think that would be a first sort of natural sweet spot. Other things like strategic infrastructure, and which includes the commercial realm, such as energy and utilities. So I think that would be the first thing that I would point to. But in general, as we say, any opportunity to vastly increase the signal to noise of seeing the attack live, in other words, proof, and also being able to inform where did we have the leaks and leaky defenses and need to improve our infrastructure. Those would be probably the most natural places. So I might just say at the top of the pyramid in an enterprise sense, and believe me, these are real numbers, the vendors that have a lot to gain from consolidation also have the best data in terms of how many point products the typical large organization is actually using. And we've said this a number of times with respect to simulation, but more on the controls validation side rather than deception. But being able to call out all of the products that you have where you're not getting anywhere near the value or the protection that you're paying for, that's very, very important. And that struggle goes on. So if this is a new tool for that, then it's really not even a vertical question. It's a size question in terms of where can I get, rapid value from deception and engagement.
Great. Okay, and just to build on that a little bit, some of the different use cases that Attivo has been seeing from our customers are around, obviously, that visibility and ability to streamline their incident response. But also insider and third-party threats have been another area where there's just been challenges to get the visibility since they have been inside the network already. And this has been in a variety of things, not only just employees or insiders within the organization, but sometimes partnerships that supply into that organization. or sometimes it's in a world of acquisitions to take a look at the cleanliness of the networks and know if there's anything before they make those connections. And then there are other things just around visibility to some of the trickier attacks like stolen credentials or man-in-the-middle, or even ransomware attacks, given some of the unique capabilities of Attivo to kind of keep that attacker busy encrypting on that, as we feed it encryption information on that single device so that it can't continue to spread. So there's quite a variety of ways that people are using this technology very successfully to simplify the detection and the overall incident response piece of it. So, great.
Yeah,
well,
I toggled back to the screen with the pain points, and we didn't talk a lot about user behavior during the presentation, but obviously the need to know what's going on in your network, which is obviously all about user activity. Obviously, it's very, very important and prioritized as something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, great. Great. And also building on another slide and topic that you had talked about was the shelfware piece of it, and looking at all of the companies that have made investments into SIM infrastructure. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity now with the distributed deception platforms that are out there, and with Attivo specifically and the things that we do with threat ops, that there is the ability to integrate that data and information and provide more value to it by adding our detection. So you can look at what we may have detected, add information from that, or from VM forensics or other things like that to be able to get that bigger picture, and then be able to share information to be able to respond. So some of that data may come in, maybe querying for failed logins around stolen credential use, or it could be just passing back that information so that they can block things off their network and prevent further further spread of that. So I think that there's an opportunity by putting SIM technology and Attivo technology together to extend the value of what people have in their SIM investment. And also there's a lot of opportunities for vendors to extend the value, or customers to get extended value from their vendors around endpoint solutions, to add that endpoint credential detection, but also through the integrations add the threat hunting piece on it as well, so that they can make sure that it's not only blocked quarantine, but it's actually eradicated from the network. So I do think there is a lot that this platform can do to prevent things from being just shelfware and continuing to add value and purpose to those solutions. Don't know if you have any other thoughts or perspective from what you're seeing in that area.
Yeah, I perhaps didn't talk enough about this today, but I was really very pleasantly surprised when we were working on the report that it's not a highly instrumented product. In other words, the engineering and the R&D is significant behind it, and virtualization makes a lot of things possible in terms of creating the deception. But a lot of the shelfware is attributed to overly instrumented products from a customer standpoint. So going back to those questions about, are we being accountable to ourselves? Do you have any favorites of those questions? But I think you probably wait for that, sort of fat pitch down the middle about deployment and how easy or simple your platform is to get up and running. If you could talk about that, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so it's a great topic. I think there's folks that are starting to get introduced to a lot of the benefits of deception technology, which make it very different from earlier generation technologies that tried to set traps within the network. Attivo has gone to great lengths to make sure that what we have is easily deployable either through our UI in a very simple way, through integrations with folks like a Casper or Forescout or Active Directory. But we've even gone one further into automating everything, so making it dynamic that it'll self-learn the environment it will continue to update based upon those learnings. It has the intelligence to know where to deploy deception based upon suspicious activity. And then it's also designed to respin after attacker engagement so that it won't get footprinted by that, or fingerprinted by that attacker. And so, like you said, there's a lot of sophistication behind the screen, so to speak, of what Attivo has done to really simplify and make that deployment easy and highly scalable. So the other thing which we sometimes hear from people too is and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on it, but some people look at deception and go, should I be concerned about it being a pivot point for an attack? And one of the things that we can assure people with our technology is the way that it is designed is there is no way for that attack to go back out onto the network in effect. We keep it completely isolated off the network and don't provide it any option to be able to come back in. We do some interesting things about being able to open up ports to communicate with command and control to get additional information, which helps with investigation of polymorphic type of attacks, but there is absolutely no way with our technology that they can pivot and come back and use those as a point to leverage. So, I know we're running just about out of time. What I'd love to hear is, Dan, if maybe you want to close with some form of a SWOT analysis around deception technology and any final thoughts and recommendations or perspectives that you may want to share.
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, obviously, we think this is an important evolution, that is deception. We've talked about the high signal to noise, but I don't think anybody really, I think the level of awareness is pretty low that you can consume this type of technology through a platform. So as we said, we commend Attivo for taking that approach, and I think generally that's obviously a very important thing that marks a product as having, a great promise. I think that I have seen some vendors out there get, the word deception up on the landing page, and upon further investigation, it looks pretty light. I'm not, calling out anybody in particular, but I just think that to the extent that there's some urgency to get heard, obviously if there's any VCs listening, this is an important space. It makes perfect sense to us to get behind this as we said, yet another important element in the layered approach. In terms of the opportunity, obviously, we think that we've said, today even, this is something that could easily get to sort of mainstream adoption. So this is something that the MSSPs are going to want to consume. I would expect a platform like Attivo's to have a wide range of partners with which to work and continue to build really strong interfaces, bidirectional interfaces, so that all of that seems very natural in terms of opportunity. And then finally, just in terms of a threat, again, it's really hard to communicate use cases sometimes in technology. So being able to be very clear about what the primary differentiator is, and whether that's a specific capability, but also the wide interoperability and the use case around orchestration and the ability to help a client build a robust process with a larger relevance to IT and serving the business. Those are really the most important elements of the product, and you have to make sure that you don't get, your message doesn't get obscured and subverted by larger players with bigger budgets and a louder voice. I think we see that from time to time, but putting together great savvy with respect to technology and product capability with the ability to hold your ground and capture market, not just educate the market, is most important. So wanted to mention those. So that's it for us. Is there anything else we can add today?
I think, Dan, you've given us a great overview and insight. Really appreciate you taking the time to join with us today. I would encourage everybody to take a look at the report that Dan Cummins and Adrian Sanabria wrote. It is called Attivo Network's High Fidelity Deception Platform Aimed to Fool Attackers. It is posted on our website. You can also ping our sales team. I'm sure they'd be happy to share a copy with you as well. We will post the recording of this so that you can share it with others. So within the next 24 to 48 hours, you should see a link for that as well. I want to thank everyone for their time and attention today in attending this webinar. Please feel free to reach out if we can schedule further demos or information for you. I want to thank you again and hope everybody has a very wonderful day. Take care, everyone.